Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 18 of the Learn How to Study Abroad in 30 Days series. If this is your first video of this series, please click into the playlist to watch the first 17 days before you get started with this one. I think it'll be helpful to start at the beginning before starting in the middle. In today's video, we're going to be talking about study abroad admissions interviews and some of the ways that you can tackle those as you go through the process after you submit your application. Let's go ahead and get started now. So for day 18 of our series, we are diving into study abroad admissions interviews. So I know that a lot of you may be thinking, well, why do I need an admissions interview for study abroad? This isn't a job, and it's not, for the most of you out there, going to be a full degree program. So why do I need this? You will find that a lot of study abroad programs more and more want to do admissions interviews because, number one, they're trying to make sure that the people who they admit into their program are very passionate about it and want to be there. And also, two, it just gives them a chance to assess what's going to be the right fit for their particular program. And it also, from a perspective from the student, is also just a great way to get some experience. I know that a lot of you out there by now, you would have had maybe some job interview experience if you have part-time job, maybe you've done internships, but then this also gives you a chance to be able to really sell yourself. It's going to be something that is important as you move along in your career. So definitely just take heed that it may be part of your admissions process, getting into a study abroad program to do an interview. So some of the common questions for students, now I just like to point out that this is definitely not all encompassing. There could be a variety of directions that they want to take it in, but a lot of these are very common, I know, for a lot of the students I work with, and then even for myself when I was interviewing for study abroad programs. These are some of the common ones because they drill down into some of the basic questions of why you're even there. So why do you want to study abroad? This is one that you could imagine. We talk about your why for study abroad quite a bit here. And so they want to know more about why you actually want to do this. This is going to be your opportunity to drill down into what we learned into day 2. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But you're going to want to just make the case for why you want to do it. You could hear a variation of this question as well. So why do you want to study abroad in London? Why do you want to study abroad in Florence? Why do you want to study abroad in the USA? This is a twist on the first question, but it really is just trying to make the case for why you want to go to that particular location, because even though there may be lots of opportunities to study abroad in a place, why do you want to go there? Why do you want to do that particular program? So again, just thinking more about your why, but it's related to why you want to go to that location. How do you see study abroad impacting your career? This is another one that a lot of admissions teams like to ask because they want to know how students are planning to use their study abroad. And again, there is no right way, but they want to know, is this something that you are going to be using to springboard yourself into an internship or an apprenticeship, or is it something that you think is going to help you in your further career? How is it going to help you? Because again, that helps for them to be able to assess whether or not you are worth being put into the program and whether or not you're going to be someone who's going to be committed to the process. How do you handle change? As we have talked about before, study abroad is often a huge change in students' lives. You are going to this brand new place. You may or may not know anyone. You have to overcome a lot of different things, cultural changes. And so they want to know how you handle change. And so this is a great way for you to be able to give some examples of how you've had to handle change in the past. Maybe if you are at the undergraduate level at this time in your career, then you can talk about what it was like for you to go from secondary school/high school to undergrad and what that looked like for you and how you handled that, because that was a huge change. Similarly, even if you are just in high school or secondary school now, maybe you have gone through something with a sports team, or maybe even just you've gone from one school to another, or it's something else that you've done where you've had to show that you can handle change. This is where you want to bring in the STAR method or something similar, where you're setting up so that you're giving a situation and then what was sort of the place where there was an antithesis and you had to have some agony going back and forth, and then how did you overcome those different things? Also, what is your biggest stressor in life? Typically, people just want to hear more about what are some of the things that stress you out. again, it doesn't have to be too overwhelming for them. They just want to hear more about, when they're asking something like this, how do you actually handle stress? So you can talk about some of the ways that you handle stress, maybe again, give an example, school related, or even if it's professionally related, of how you handled something stressful, how you overcame it. That's really what they're trying to get down to. Last but not least on here, what type of personalities do you get along with? With this one, you don't have to really go out of your way to put down any personality types, but you want to be as honest as possible, just because as people are assembling their study abroad programs, just like with anything else, they are looking for the right fit. And so again, if you are someone who is super extroverted, for example, then maybe you're not going to be the best fit with a program where they tend to have a lot of introverts or people that tend to like to do things alone, or however it's going to look for you. And similarly, if they are going to be in charge of doing your housing and they want to know what type of personalities do you work well with, they're going to be trying to assess the types of people that you could potentially be living with. So you want to be as honest as possible without being too negative. So showcasing your why for study abroad, as we mentioned, remembering day 2, this is why it was so important for you to go through and get started on the planning worksheet. If you have not had a chance to do that yet, then click into the description below to access the worksheet. But with that, as well as with the parent plan, this is where you were able to really flesh out your why. And so this is your time within the interview to tell them exactly why you want to do this with details. So not just, I want to go study abroad in New York because I think New York might be fun, but really give them details of how this is going to help you in the future, why you're passionate about this program, why you're interested in doing this now, and really make the case for them. So some common sense interview tips for you. I know that a lot of this may seem a little bit repetitive or also on the nose, but I just feel that particularly coming out of 2020 and 2021, there has been much more of a shift to flexibility. And so I feel like a lot of people have forgotten how to do this, or maybe this is your first time interviewing. And so you're like, I don't know what I need to be doing. And you're just going to get to the step of looking up things once you get there. We're going to go over some of these tips. So the first thing is to be on time. So this is going to be number one if you're looking at any interview from even a recruiter at the professional level stage of your career. They're going to say to be on time. It is very important to do that. So if you are doing your study abroad admissions interview in person, that means that you are showing up in the lobby or at the check-in spot at least 10 minutes in advance. You don't want to get there and be disheveled and you just got off your bike or just got out of your car, or you were in traffic or whatever it was. You want to give your time to actually get there, get settled into your seat so that you're ready to meet whoever's going to be interviewing you, and have a chance to maybe pop to the restroom or to get something to drink, whatever that's going to look like for you. Also, if you are doing it online, same thing. We know that we now live in a much more online world with things like Zoom. And so similarly, you want to be in the waiting room 5 to 7 minutes ahead of time. For most platforms now, they do have an automatic waiting room. So it's not like you're going to click on the link and go into the meeting. So you don't have to worry about that. But it just shows that you took the time to show up a little bit early and that, you know, you're there waiting, but you're not there too early so that the people on the other end don't feel very rushed. But just to kind of show that you're there. Also, too, if you are doing it online, your interviews, make sure that you have your background clear from any type of distraction, so you don't have pets crawling around in the background, you don't have people coming in and out as much as you can avoid it. I know everyone's living situation is different, and so you may not be able to avoid that completely, but you want to make sure that you can minimize your distractions as much as possible if you're doing an online interview. You want to also dress the part. So similarly to our sort of online world that a lot of us live in now, where everything is done online, including a lot of interviews, we've gotten a little bit more flexible, but you want to make sure that even from the waist up, if you're going to be online, that you look professional. And of course, it goes without saying that if you are doing your interview in person, you want to look as professional as possible. It doesn't have to be a 5-piece suit. It doesn't have to be, for my Americans out there, a prom dress or anything like that. But you're making sure that you're presenting yourself well, that you have, done your hair, that you have, styled yourself, whatever that looks like for you. And I know for a lot of students out there, you're like, well, I don't have a lot of money to do anything. You can borrow clothes from a friend or go thrift shopping or whatever is going to work best for you, but make sure that you look presentable so you're not showing up in jeans with the cutouts and all those different things. You're not doing that for a study abroad admissions interview. I know that it may not seem as intense or as real as, let's say, you're applying for your first job, but it still matters how you present yourself in this interview. You are going to be acknowledging each interviewer within this process. So for a lot of study abroad interviews, you now have the panel interview. So this is going to be 2 to 4 people at a time in a room. I know that that alone can seem very scary, but one of the things that you want to do is that you want to make sure that everyone is engaged with you in the interview. So sometimes in these interviews, you're going to have it where there's one person who's the main person who's asking all the questions, and then everyone else in there is just kind of writing things down, and they're sitting there engaged, but they're not talking to you. Or it could be a situation where every person has a set of questions that they need to ask you. Regardless, what you're going to want to do is whenever someone is talking to you and they're asking you a question, you want to look them in the eye and you're listening to them as they're reading and you're nodding along and just showing those nonverbal cues that you are engaged in the conversation. The minute that it is turned back over to you, you're going to want to do what I call the swivel. And it has to be very subtle. It's not sort of a, kind of every single second. But what I call the swivel, which is something that I was taught from a very young age, is that you want to make sure that as you are answering the question, that you are going around the room at least once or twice. And, as you're answering the question, you're looking at this person, this person, this person, this person, and so on and so forth. You don't have to do it like a robot, but you're making sure that everyone is engaged in that answer so that they understand that you are talking to all of them. A lot of times, one of the things that's interesting is that in panel interviews, sometimes that can be something where people actually notice it on their end where they understood what you were trying to say, but they felt like, well, they never acknowledged me. They were just looking at the person who was asking them the question. They never acknowledged me, and I didn't feel part of the interview. So make sure that if you are in a panel interview that you are acknowledging people as you go along so that they feel like you are talking to them individually as you go along. You want to make sure that you have your important documents ready. So this goes for whether you are doing your admissions interview online or in person. So if you're doing it in person, that just means you're taking extra copies of your study abroad application, of your transcripts if you have access to those, of your essay, anything like that. You'll just take extra copies because, again, we live in a digital world, but sometimes maybe the place where you're going, they had a power outage 10 minutes before you got there and they can't get access to their documents. You want to have that on hand so that they don't feel off their game, and also to you look extra prepared. If you're doing it online, you're going to want to have it in one document. I usually like to have it in a PDF that's linkable, or in a Google Doc, which is often the same thing, where basically if you are, let's say, in a Zoom and there are 2 people in there that they lost track of your application, you could say, well, sure, I can share it with you. Let me link the PDF in the chat, and then you can just share that really easily. Make sure that it is free of restrictions, of course, so that anyone with the link can view it. But then that's something, again, where they don't have to be clicking around on different screens. You can be like, I have you. I can just go ahead and send it to you. So make sure that you have that on hand. You want to strike a balance between being excited and not being desperate. This is something that I work a lot with students on when I am coaching them, particularly before interviews. And this is not just at the study abroad level. This is even when you're going into your first job interview. But of course, you are excited about being there or you wouldn't have done it. So make sure that you are showing excitement through your nonverbal cues, through the way that you are speaking, and also just make sure, too, that you get a good night's sleep so that you're not groggy and that you're not low energy. But you don't want to come off as desperate. So you don't want it to seem as if this is the only option you have and you must get in and you've got to make them get you in there. You don't want to come off that way. I've seen that too many times, and that is not very appealing to people. And even though on your end you may think that it sounds exciting, it makes you sound a lot weaker than you would want to be. So show it excitement, show enthusiasm, but don't be desperate. You also want to show passion for your program and not just the location. So I think a lot of times with students, they get lost on the location because it is a glamorous thing of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to go live in Dubai for 5 months, or I'm going to get to spend a year in London, or wherever it is. And you get really excited about the location and what you're going to be able to see and do. But you also, again, want to show passion for the program that you want to do. So you want to express that why for the program as well, and why they should be choosing you to be into that program, not just because it is in a specific location. You also want to be honest about the other programs you're applying for. So I know with a lot of students in particular, it's a bit different once you get into your career and you're thinking about jobs. But a lot of times if you're asked, are you applying to other programs? A lot of students shy away from answering that question. They feel like, oh, like if I say yes, then I'm going to get X out of this program. A lot of times this is not a trick question. They're just trying to see, well, what is this person's thought process? They've gone through, they've researched other programs. Why are they interested in that? That may be a time for them to even drill down and say, well, why are you interested in that program, and what makes that program different from our program? That could be another thing where you get a chance to sort of sell it. Well, I like this program for this reason, and I like this program for this particular reason, and just be honest about that. It could even also help you too, because a lot of times they obviously may know a lot about the other programs, but they want to see what have you actually done within your research and whether or not you're going to be a good fit for their program versus the other program. So be honest about it. If you're applying for lots of different programs, I wouldn't say, well, I'm applying for 15 programs, because that can make you, at least from a admissions officer perspective, seem wishy-washy. To me, I think that's totally acceptable. But a lot of times if you're presenting lots of options, people get overwhelmed. So you can say, I'm applying for 2 or 3 different programs. And then if they ask you for more details, don't feel embarrassed about sharing those. Last but not least, you want to ask questions. So this is going to be relevant to you in a study abroad interview. It's also going to be relevant to you in any interview that you do in the future. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of the interview and the interviewers say, do you have any questions? And you just say, no, I think I got it all figured out. You never have it all figured out, even if you have it all figured out. So even if you've gone through and you've read the entire website and you've downloaded the brochure and you've gone to all the seminars and all of that, there's still more questions to be asked. So typically I like to recommend that students will go ahead and have 2 to 3 populated in their mind questions that they come into the interview with that they want to ask at the end or sometime during the interview. Or even if you are in the interview and certain things come up, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Some of the basic things you can ask are just having them talk a little bit more about the scope of the program. You read about it online, but now you want to hear more about it from them in person. You can ask them about some of the success of some of the alums. So what have some people gone on to do? There's so many different types of questions that you can ask them, but I don't want you to ever just get to the interview and say, I don't have any questions. That's not going to work out. So this is a tip that I also wanted to mention as well. It sort of hangs on to the point that I was talking about before about making sure that you have your documents available for people. So in that PDF or extra copies if it's a hard copy. But you never want to assume that the interviewer/interviewers have any knowledge of your application. And I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive because you're like, well, they invited me into interview. They must know everything about me. Yes and no. There is a high chance of probability that the people interviewing you would have gone through your information. But sometimes things happen. And so, for example, in panel interviews, maybe one of the people who was originally supposed to interview you is out sick today. And so they had to add in someone else from the organization. And that person, they only know your name. They don't know anything about you. And so with that, that is going to be important for you to have those key documents. So maybe they just got pulled into the room 5 minutes before the interview. So you can say, oh, you didn't get a chance to see my resume or my application. I have it here. So again, that makes you look super prepared. But also too, when you're giving your answers, you're going to want to make sure that you are giving those answers as if people have never heard it before. So one of the things that can be a little bit annoying in an interview, especially for someone like me who now sits on the other side of interviews listening to people, is if they start telling a story or telling a situation as if I've heard it before. So they'll say, oh, well, as I mentioned in my essay, well, I didn't read your essay. As I mentioned on my resume, I didn't actually see your resume. So you always want to come to it from a perspective of setting up whatever it is you're talking about. So if they're asking you about a time when you were really stressed, you want to set it up as from a time of this is what happened. And then you can say, well, and I also mentioned this in my essay, so that you definitely connect the dots for them, but you're not sort of doing it out of context. So definitely something important to remember, that there could be a situation where there's some people in the interview that don't know anything about you until you get into the room. So just make sure that you're mindful of that. Last but not least, I just want to put this out here about post-interview follow-up. Again, this is not specific to study abroad only. This is something that you should carry through with you throughout the rest of your career, but following up to say thank you can go a very long way. Is it going to be the final thing that makes a difference in the decision? Likely not, but people remember that. It's going to be very important to do. So for me, I'm a little bit old school. I definitely like to do handwritten notes when I can, but I know that it can be a little bit unrealistic to want to send something all the way overseas, and by the time that they would get it, it would be kind of out of context anyway, because it could take weeks or however long. So at the bare minimum, make sure that you send a follow-up thank you email either to the panel as a whole, or if you have the opportunity to find out what each individual person's email is, make sure that you send them a thank you. It doesn't have to be long and drawn out, just saying thank you so much for taking time to interview me today, or even if you want to do it the day after yesterday. I really appreciate it. I just want to re-highlight my interest in the program. You could even bring up something that was interesting to you from the interview, just to show that you were in tune with it. I can promise you that being on this side of things now, where I interview people all the time, even though recruiters and even at the college university level, when people are starting to engage people with careers and they talk about all these different things that you should do, and they mention the thank you note, the majority of people still do not send a thank you note. They don't even send a thank you email. They don't send thank you anything. I don't know if it's sort of this perception of, well, everyone must be doing it, so I'm not going to do it because that's not, it's just overrated or whatever. Most people are not doing it. They don't take the time to do it. Whether or not they think they should or not, you definitely should. It just puts a nice, sweet button on it, as I like to call it, to sort of close that loop and just say thank you. Even though it may not be the most life-changing thing in the world towards the decision, it at least shows that you were engaged. So whether it be an email, or if you're going to be able to send it, let's say if you're in one part of the country and you're sending to some place that's just right next door, so you're in the UK and you're sending to Italy, that's not going to take a long time to get there. Or if you even are doing a faculty-led program and so you're on campus with the people who interviewed you, you can just write a quick note and then go into the faculty room and put it in their mailboxes. So make sure that you do follow up. I promise you that it will go a long way in the end. And so I hope by watching this video, you've been able to ease your fears a little bit about study abroad admissions interviews. I know that any type of interview is very stressful. And when it comes to study abroad interviews, they are no different in terms of what you might be feeling. As a reminder, there are lots of different freebies from this course. So definitely check into the description box and download the ones that you may have missed. And with that being said, I will see you tomorrow for day 19.